He who is born from within asks no permission from the outside. Alan Watts, before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it, and let's get started. Did you know you were registered in the system before you ever agreed to be part of it? You were born, and in that very moment, you were entered into a structure that never asked for your permission. You were assigned a number, a name, a certificate, a nationality, a future. And from that moment, everything that made you unique, your soul, your silence, your wildness, started to fade. You didn't choose to be a citizen. You didn't choose to owe taxes. You didn't sign anything. But they acted like you did, like you consented to be part of a game with invisible rules. And the most dangerous part? Everyone around you accepted it. So you did too. And maybe for years, you played along, studied what they told you to, worked where they told you to, said what they said was right, tried to be someone, tried to achieve. But something inside stayed quiet. Something never woke up until now. Because there comes a moment when you stop. You sit in your kitchen. You stare at the wall. And something hits you. Not in the head, not in the mind, but deeper. A sense that something is wrong, but you can't explain it. That your life is not yours. That you're living a version of yourself, pre-approved by someone else. That's the beginning. That's when it starts. That's when you begin to feel again. And feeling is dangerous because it means you're alive. And once you're alive inside, truly alive, you can no longer be controlled like before. You don't blindly obey. You don't stay numb. But here's the catch. The system doesn't want you to wake up. It built itself around your numbness. It functions through your silence. It feeds on your participation. And now, you're pulling away. And it feels like your whole world is shaking. Of course it does. Because the version of life you knew wasn't built for your freedom. It was built for your usefulness. You were never broken. You were contained, shaped, programmed. But now, something in you cracked. And that crack is where your truth is coming through. You're not going crazy. You're not losing control. You're finally meeting yourself without filters. That pain you feel, that's not weakness. That's rebirth. Because the system only recognizes you as long as you stay dead, inside. But the moment you come alive, you are no longer theirs. You were born again, without permission, without their blessing, without signing up for their rules. And that's terrifying, not for you, but for them. That's why they gave you distractions, labels, diagnoses, entertainment, responsibility, to keep your fire buried. But fire doesn't go away. It waits. And now it's burning, quietly, deeply, unstoppably. Because you didn't come here to obey. You came here to remember who you are. And they're afraid of that. Because once you remember, you can't unsee. You can't unknow. You can't go back. You're not crazy. You're not lost. You're waking up. And waking up means being born without asking the system for permission. The moment you start waking up inside, the system gets nervous. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're starting to see too much. You begin to notice that everything you thought was normal is just a structure built to keep you obedient. Every document you ever signed, every number assigned to your name, every ID, certificate, contract. You were told it was just how things work. But what no one explained is that all these things placed you under a jurisdiction without ever giving you a choice. You didn't volunteer to be part of it. You were born into it, without consent, without awareness, without the right to say no. And once you realize this, it's not just anger you feel, it's betrayal. A deep, quiet betrayal that echoes through every decision you ever made. You start to see the trap, Not the dramatic one, not the visible cage, but the subtle one. The one hidden behind words like responsibility, citizenship, duty. They told you these things were noble. But what if they were just tools to keep you compliant? What if everything you were taught about being a good person was a script designed to keep you manageable? Here's the truth most people aren't ready to hear. Any obligation comes from agreement, and most of us never actually agreed. We were born, registered, tracked, controlled, and told we were free. But freedom isn't something someone gives you. It's something you remember, something you take back. And when you do, when you realize you can question everything, that you can choose what to accept and what to reject, the system starts to panic. Not because it loses power, but because it loses control over your mind. That's the first layer of awakening, understanding that you were never truly asked. You were simply placed. And now, as you begin to feel your own thoughts, your own questions, your own refusal, something shifts. You begin to pull your energy back. You stop giving blind consent. And that's when you truly start living. If you feel this in your body, in your bones, in the silence between thoughts, don't ignore it. That's your signal. That's the pulse of something ancient inside you waking up. And if these words hit you somewhere deep, not just in your head, but in your truth, listen. If you feel like this is about you, subscribe to the channel. Algorithms will show it to others who are also ready to stop running. And join the Telegram. That's where the real conversations begin. And if you see yourself in these words, write in the comments, "I no longer run from pain." Let's see how many of us are ready for the truth. The most dangerous illusion the system sells is the idea that you have a choice, that you're free because you can vote, or switch jobs, or move to another country. But none of that is real freedom. It's just different walls of the same cage. The truth is, you were never meant to have full autonomy. You were given options that all lead back to control. Every path pre-designed. Every choice pre-approved. You were never taught to question the structure itself, only to operate more efficiently within it. From the moment you enter school, you're trained to follow, to seek approval, to compete, to obey. Not because it helps you grow, but because it prepares you to function inside the system without breaking it. They never taught you to ask, "What if I don't want to participate at all?" Because that's the question that breaks their illusion. And when you finally ask it, not out of rebellion, but out of clarity, the entire framework starts to shake. You begin to see that what they called rules are just agreements you were never part of. You realize that most people operate under contracts they didn't consciously sign. They think they have to because everyone else does. But obligation without awareness is not consent. It's programming. That's how the system survives, through mass unconsciousness, through normalization of roles that no one fully understands, through rituals of adulthood that only benefit those in power. You grow up thinking this is life. You get a job, pay taxes, register everything, prove your existence constantly. But you were never told that you could say no, that you could opt out, that every obligation has a back door if you're willing to find it. Not through violence or conflict, but through reclaiming your mind, your words, your choices. Most people never reach this point. They get close, but fear pulls them back. Fear of being alone, of being called crazy, of being outside the safety net. But here's the truth. The net was never safe. It was just soft enough to keep you from noticing the cage. And now you're starting to see the bars. Not outside, but inside your own beliefs. And that's when it becomes clear. The system doesn't hold you. Your conditioning does. The language you use, the ideas you never questioned, the fear of rejection, the fear of being different, the fear of losing comfort. But comfort is the reward for obedience. And obedience is the cost of your life. When you begin to choose truth over comfort, something irreversible happens. You start walking out, quietly, powerfully, without asking anyone for permission. There comes a moment when the truth stops being abstract and starts burning inside you. It's not just intellectual anymore. It's not about theories or ideas. It's a visceral knowing that your life has been lived according to someone else's design. And that realization doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels violent. It shakes the foundation of everything you believed about yourself, about the world, about what's right. Because suddenly, what you called your life looks more like a long chain of silent agreements. And you never knew you were agreeing. You thought you were surviving. You thought you were being responsible. But really, you were being shaped into something predictable, manageable, safe. And when that illusion cracks, the first thing that rises is not peace. It's rage. Deep, ancient rage. Not the kind that lashes out at others, but the kind that says, no more. It's the anger of a soul waking up from sedation. It's the fire that was buried under layers of politeness, performance, and survival. Most people try to suppress that fire. They say, stay calm, don't be dramatic, be reasonable. But that fire is not a threat. It's a signal. It tells you that something sacred inside you refuses to stay silent. It tells you that you're done pretending, that you're no longer willing to play a role that kills your spirit just to maintain peace with a system that never had your well-being in mind. This fire is sacred. It's not here to destroy others. It's here to burn the lies, to burn the contracts you never meant to sign, to burn the masks you were forced to wear. And yes, it will make people uncomfortable. Your awakening will trigger those still asleep. Your truth will challenge their stories. But you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe the system your obedience. You don't owe your ancestors your continuation of their survival strategies. What you owe is to yourself, to your own breath, to your own soul, to your own truth, no matter how inconvenient it may be for others. And it's in that moment when you feel your anger not as an enemy, but as a compass, that you take your first real step toward freedom. Not surface-level freedom, not the freedom to pick your job or your favorite brand, but real freedom. The kind that starts with the word no. The kind that doesn't need validation. The kind that says, I will not trade my aliveness for acceptance anymore. Because acceptance that requires you to abandon yourself is just another form of control. And you've had enough of that. So let the fire rise, let the grief come, let the sadness speak. Because all of it is part of your return. This is not the end of your breakdown. It's the beginning of your birth. A birth the system never authorized. A birth they tried to prevent. But here you are, alive, awake, and no longer asking for permission. Even after awakening, the system doesn't disappear. It adapts. It tries to pull you back in, not through force, but through fear. It whispers subtle questions into your mind. But what will you do without us? How will you survive? What if you're wrong? It offers comfort, routine, certainty. It reminds you of everything you might lose. Your job, your social status, your safety net. But look closely. None of that ever really belonged to you. It was loaned to you in exchange for your silence. You weren't free. You were just kept stable enough not to question anything. The moment you begin to step away, all the things that once felt secure now feel like traps. You see the fine print. You hear the unspoken threat. come back to the program, or pay the price. That's how the system keeps control, not with guns or violence, but with internalized fear. They don't need to chase you. They taught you to chase yourself. They installed the voice inside you that says, "Don't make trouble. Stay in line. Be realistic." That voice isn't you. It's the echo of everything they wanted you to believe. It's the residue of decades of obedience. And once you see it for what it is, you can stop fighting yourself. You can stop thinking something's wrong with you. You were never broken. You were conditioned. And now, the spell is breaking. But here's the paradox. As you wake up, things don't get easier. In fact, they often get harder. At first. Because now, you see through the roles. You see the fake smiles, the forced gratitude, the lives people live to avoid being rejected. You walk through the world, but you're no longer fully in it. You're aware. And with awareness comes the pain of disconnection. The grief of watching others sleepwalk while you try to stay awake. But that pain isn't a problem. It's the cost of truth. And the more you accept it, the more grounded you become. You stop chasing approval. You stop trying to fit back into a world that only accepted the version of you that didn't know who you were. The real challenge is not escaping the system. It's reclaiming your mind from the subtle contracts you never questioned. The agreements that said, "I'll be quiet if you let me belong." But now you know that kind of belonging is too expensive. And once you feel the weight of your own truth, you'll never be able to carry those lies again. You'll rather walk alone in honesty than be surrounded by people who only see your mask. This is the moment where true power begins. Not the power to dominate, not the power to perform, but the quiet power of someone who no longer needs external permission to exist. The world will call you extreme, dangerous, naive, but the world has no idea what to do with someone who can no longer be bought. That's why they fear you, because your mind is no longer theirs. The question now is, can you live outside the reach of the system, partially or fully, without losing yourself? And the answer is yes, but not in the way most people imagine. It's not about escaping to the woods or cutting off all contact. It's about waking up to the truth of how the system functions, then choosing, consciously, how much of yourself you give to it. Most people operate from default. They sign what they're told. They register without reading. They accept roles they never wanted. But when you begin to question the source of every obligation, something changes. You realize that most control comes through voluntary participation, through silent consent. And once you stop giving that consent blindly, you shift from being a subject to being a sovereign. There are practical ways to do this. You start by studying jurisdiction, not from conspiracy theories, but from raw legal structure. You learn that documents are contracts, and contracts require agreement. No agreement, no obligation. You begin to question why you're paying, what you're signing, who benefits. You may realize you can remove yourself from certain systems by simply not continuing to feed them, refusing ID renewals, declining benefits that require submission, choosing cash over traceable payments, bartering, growing, building. The deeper you go, the more you find small, powerful ways to live as a free human, not fully invisible, but no longer owned. It's not about fighting the system. That's still giving it power. It's about becoming ungovernable, not through resistance, but through disinterest. You become someone who cannot be manipulated through fear, through guilt, through reward. You stop needing approval. You stop chasing legitimacy from structures that were never built to respect you. And you begin to create. You create alternatives. You connect with others who've also seen through the illusion. You build networks, not based on status or money, but on trust and truth. You learn how to communicate outside of institutions, how to trade value directly, how to build shelter, security, meaning, without asking permission. And yes, it's hard. You'll be misunderstood. You'll face pressure. You might lose relationships that were based on shared illusion. But what you gain in return is your self-respect, your sovereignty, your time, your clarity. You stop existing as a function. You start living as a being, a man or woman who remembers what it means to walk this earth without being owned by it. That's not an escape. That's a return to life, to breath, to presence. And no system, no government, no law, no screen can ever own that again, unless you let them. True liberation starts with knowledge, not blind rebellion, not emotional protest, but precise understanding. The system was built through language, contracts, documents, and consent, most of it silent. If you want out, you have to first understand what you're in. That means studying law, but not the kind handed down in schools or textbooks designed to confuse you. You start with jurisdiction. Learn to distinguish between legal fiction and living man. Understand the difference between a person and a human being in legal terms. Learn how your name, capitalized on a birth certificate, represents a corporate entity created on your behalf, and how your interaction with that entity determines the system's control over you. Next comes the study of contract law. Every agreement you enter into, whether you realize it or not, comes with obligations. You need to see how your signature becomes consent. How every time you sign a government form, renew a license, apply for a passport, you are voluntarily reaffirming your status inside the system. And here's the secret. You can learn to revoke consent. You can condition it. You can demand clarification. You can choose when and how to interact. And in some cases, choose not to engage at all. A powerful area to explore is negotiable instruments and the law of bills and notes, what's called commercial law or uniform commercial code. This is the language the system truly respects because it's how commerce operates globally. It's not about loopholes. It's about speaking their language better than they do, learning what a promissory note is, understanding how a debt is created and what discharges it, knowing how credit, trust, and offer and acceptance define everything from taxes to fines. It's not theory, it's architecture. Once you see it, you can walk through it without being captured by it. Practical steps you can begin today. Start reading real legal definitions, not what you think a word means, but how it's defined in law. Learn what consent, person, contract, obligation, claim, legal title actually mean. Then study your country's constitution, codes, and administrative procedures. Not to memorize them, but to see the patterns, to see where you've been tricked into acting as something you are not. Explore sovereign living movements, private trusts, common law concepts. Not to copy others, but to understand your options. Choose your path based on knowledge, not desperation. Connect with people who've walked this road. Watch lectures, read legal case studies, follow researchers and thinkers who decode this system, not to escape life, but to return to it without chains. Keep your mind sharp, your words precise, your contracts intentional. Because every moment you act without awareness, you're pulled back in. You don't need to destroy the system. You need to stop feeding it. Quietly, confidently, unapologetically. And if you've felt something shift inside you during this video, subscribe to the channel. Let algorithms show this to those ready to remember who they are. and join the Telegram. That's where we go deeper, without filters. If you're ready to stop playing roles and reclaim your life, write in the comments, "I take back my consent." Let's see how many of us are ready to walk out. Not in anger, but in clarity. This is not the end. This is the beginning of something the system can't measure, control, or define. This is your return, without permission.